Hey everyone, it's good to be with you again on this Wednesday morning is when we're recording lectionary psalm reflection, and we're looking towards this coming Sunday. And we have entered a new season. We're out of Christmas, believe it or not, the 12 days of Christmas, which end, today is actually the last day of Christmas because it's January. No, yesterday was the last day of
Today's
Christmas.
Epiphany.
Today is Epiphany, January 6th. And so by the time Sunday rolls around, we'll already be in the first Sunday of Epiphany. So this is our lectionary psalm, Psalm 29, the whole thing for the first Sunday in Epiphany. Stefan, please read.
Here we go. Psalm 29, a psalm of David. Ascribe to the Lord, you heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Sirion like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forests bare. And in his temple all cry glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord is enthroned as king forever. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace.
Awesome. Well, we've been kind of using this three-part format, which is kind of new. What stood out to you about this psalm? What did we learn about God from this psalm? And how does this psalm help us to pray? So I don't know if we'll specifically address those three, but those are kind of floating around, I think, in the conversation. So let me just open up with just like a few thoughts and notes. You see the sign behind me, voice and water. So those are kind of the themes of Psalm 29, which later, Cameron, I don't think you're going to record, you're not going to record a song, but we're going to link a YouTube song. But it's actually, if you do a search on YouTube of Psalm 29, there is not a whole lot
Mm.
because it's kind of a weird psalm a little bit. Like if you're going to write a song based on a psalm, you're not going to pick 29.
Mm.
Just because there's lots of imagery about storms and floods and like trees getting stripped. And then there's not even a call really for the people of God to worship the Lord. In fact, at the beginning of the psalm, verse 1 and 2, the psalmist is calling the heavenly beings to ascribe glory. So there's no call for God's people.
Mm.
It's like, hey, you angels, hey, you heavenly beings, whatever that may be, um, give him glory, which is interesting. So you have a human as a choir director, um, but the choir is made up of angels and heavenly beings.
Interesting.
And then at the end, there's kind of a benediction. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. So you kind of have this beginning and then you have this end. And in the middle, you have this really interesting kind of strange part about floodwaters and about storms and about the voice of the Lord. We don't need to get too much into that, but you can imagine for like ancient peoples, a gigantic, powerful storm kind of rips through the land. And um, it's scary.
Mm.
And so you begin to equate, there's a connection between what's happening in the skies, what's happening in the atmosphere with spiritual beings, or um, there's something happening that has to do with the gods or has to do with a god. And so you can kind of see now we watch the weather station or the weather, we see what's happening on Wood TV channel 8, and they talk about atmospheric pressures and barometers and cold fronts and all that kind of stuff. But the ancient peoples, they had no sense of any of that. There was no scientific explanation for what was happening in the skies. And so you can imagine how they would make this equivalent. So basically what they're saying is the Lord is the Lord of the storm. And there's a huge connection between kind of waters and chaos
Mm.
in the Bible. In fact, you could draw an equal sign between the two. The waters and the chaos are synonymous. And so here, the Lord is the Lord over the chaos. The Lord is the one over the waters, over the floodwaters. So the psalmist is basically saying that the Lord, in a roundabout way, the psalmist is saying the Lord is the Lord of all. The Lord is the one over the chaotic waters. Um, and then there's this whole connection between voice too. So I'm gonna open it up just and hear what you guys think, but I want to draw a connection between Mark, because Stefan, you're going to preach on Mark this coming Sunday,
Mhm.
which is the baptism of Jesus. Yes.
No, it's John. It's the introduction of John the Baptist.
Oh,
I think that's what I'm studying for, at least.
is that in Mark?
Yeah, Mark 1, 4, verse 4 through 11.
Oh yeah, yeah. You must be right.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll find out, won't we?
Hey everyone, trust us. We are organized.
Yes, that's right.
It's a new
You're
year.
gonna get a Bible passage on Sunday.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's open it up. What do you guys think?
So I agree, Sam, that this psalm it's a really kind of a different psalm, um, and I think it gets describes itself pretty well in verse 2. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. Um, I think 18 times the Lord's name is mentioned in this psalm. So as we read it, it's like so repetitive. The Lord, the Lord, the Lord, and then the phrase "the voice of the Lord" occurs 7 times. So it's an extremely repetitive psalm, and it's almost as if, and I read a commentator who said this, but it's almost as if the psalmist and the people of God, as they read this psalm, are kind of working themselves up into um, like some kind of emotional response to what's going on, because this psalm is pure praise. It's just generating excitement, and then this idea of the storm is brewing, and so this whole psalm kind of feels like one giant crescendo of praise. It actually, um, as I read it, it kind of reminded me of a lot of contemporary worship music, where there's just a lot of repetitive things, and it builds and builds and builds until it finally kind of explodes, and it's this great big thing. And you know how a lot of psalms, not a lot of psalms, a lot of songs have, you know, a real lyrical depth to them. A lot of Christmas hymns have that, just a real lyrical depth. Oh, how a rose ere blooming type of thing. Um, this one doesn't as much. It's just kind of staying a little bit more on the surface, and it's kind of working us up into a frenzy and helping us feel this storm. And I wondered if that was a kind of if people, if the ancient worshippers of God kind of experienced this psalm in that kind of way. I don't know, just my little connection.
That's good. Cameron, jump in.
I guess I read it quite differently than you guys, because I see most of the depth sort of being in the verbs of the voice of the Lord breaking the cedar, Lebanon skipping like a calf, the voice of the Lord striking, shaking, twisting the oaks, stripping the forest bare, and it's like it's always sort of changing this really aggressive, almost violent imagery of sort of an act of God. And the cool thing, you know, like the scattering of the oaks, like breaking down like cedars or timber, is almost like a holy tornado just coming through and just laying waste of this entire forest. So my brain sort of lights up like a light bulb when I read this. And what's really fascinating is you have all this chaos of nature and God doing these powerful things, and then it ends with the Lord blesses His people with peace. It's sort of like He's going to destroy the earth and scatter everything, and then he's just going to sort of sit and dwell. It's like the calm after the storm,
Yeah.
which I think is really, which I think says a lot about God too. It's like in order to penetrate the heart, you have to go through all this junk, and it's really chaotic and intense and violent. And then when you get to sort of your true self and your truest nature, your, you know, as an infant or whatever, it's just this little peaceful like hug or whatever. So I think that this would be an amazing psalm to set if you sort of like really dug into the imagery, particularly in the verbs, is where I see a lot of the meat.
Well, you would be unique in that sense because I don't think a lot of other worship leaders have felt that way
Yeah,
about Psalm
that's
29.
really
In fact,
interesting. Yeah.
well, I did find like a choral version of this song by a church in Texas, but they stuck in verse 1 and 2 and then in verse 11. So they kind of skipped most of the whole middle part about trees and about storms and about the voice. I don't think they knew what to do with it.
Yeah, the other thing is like I mean, when I first read it the first time, I said, well, you know, what is this voice? Because we so often associate a voice with sound, and sound is interesting because actually sound can kill, and sound can literally tear apart. They've like used sound in warfare, like where they brought in like this thing that's putting out like 300 decibels worth of things to scatter crowds of people and whatnot. So sound is, I mean, incredibly, you know, they say like even the atom bomb or whatever, when it dropped, like everybody, the sound could like literally blow you, like knock you over sort of thing. And so there's like that association of the voice of the Lord. Is it this powerful, like just like gush of sound that we associate with voice? Or is it sort of something something deeper? I guess that was a question I had
Well,
about how is the voice, you know, because we associate sort of the word of God. In the beginning was the word, and the word was God, which we associate that with Jesus, the Son of God, um, that's incarnate in Jesus. And so, yeah, I just didn't know like where voice is used in other ways.
well, let me jump in on that because I already alluded to this a little bit, but the lectionary they pair Psalm 29 with Mark, and what's happening in the beginning of Mark. Where do we see voice and water coming together?
Baptism.
The baptism of Jesus. So
Yeah, my
now,
line went to voice in the wilderness, which is John the
yeah,
Baptist too, right?
so there's a voice in the wilderness, and then Jesus comes to the water. And what was once in Psalm 29, water as a destructive, chaotic force, is now the means of grace.
Mm.
And we celebrate that every Sunday. We pour water as a sacrament pointing to grace, which is really interesting. So, but we also, so the water gets poured over Jesus, and then we hear a voice of blessing upon Jesus, identifying him as the beloved Son.
Mm.
And there's another passage in the Gospels where the voice of God is also heard pronouncing blessing over Jesus. And there's an interesting line in that story where people think that they maybe heard thunder. They weren't sure about, was that the voice of God or was that thunder? And so obviously the gospel writers picking up on Psalm 29 and making that connection.
So, Sam, I'm looking at the lectionary text for this Sunday,
Yeah,
and it does include the baptism of Jesus.
that's
So
what I
it's the
thought.
introduction of John the Baptist, and then so Mark does everything so quickly. Everything in Mark happens immediately. You'll notice the word immediately throughout Mark, and so Jesus is baptized immediately, and so that is in there in this. It's the lectionary text is verse 4 through 11.
Mhm. The Bible Project, I don't know if you guys listen or pay attention to the Bible Project. It's a nonprofit thing. They make videos. You can look it up. Anyways, they talk about hyperlinks. So the gospel writers are writing these stories, but as they're writing the stories, they have all this knowledge of the Torah and the scriptures. And so it's like there's all these like hyperlinks, just like in Wikipedia. If you're reading about something, you can click on all these links and it will link you to another page. And you just imagine like, Mark writing the story of the baptism of Jesus, but in his mind, he has all these hyperlinks. And one of the hyperlinks, I'm sure, is to Psalm 29.
Mm.
So we don't grab that connection. So thankfully the lectionary helps us to make the connection, but the readers of Mark would have definitely picked up on Psalm 29.
That's great. Very cool.
So how are you going to read it on Sunday, Sam? To give some thought to that.
Do I yell it out, or do I
Yeah.
do the opposite and do I whisper?
Yeah.
Because the voice of the Lord is so powerful that he doesn't need to scream and shout. He just needs to speak, maybe even a whisper.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to post this, and Cameron, you're going to link a song.
Yeah, I wasn't able to record a song because I'm just coming off of vacation. So yeah, we'll pick one out. And
Yeah, so look right in the show notes under the video, and you'll see a link. Click on the link, and you'll see a musical version of Psalm 29. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week, Wednesday.
bye-bye.
See ya.